Okay, so we've all heard about the truckers, the convoys, the millions of Canadians that came out and stood for freedom. But what is the real reason that they're out there? I mean, if we could get way down to the bottom of what it really is they're after, how would we describe that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. In Canada, we have what is well known as the Charter of Rights. It's our constitution, our roadmap, and it actually describes in Section 52 that it is the supreme law of Canada. This means any law, municipal, provincial, federal, they all live underneath this law. So it's a pretty serious document for Canadians. In fact, this is what our police officers swear an oath to. Their duty is to protect and defend this Constitution and ensure that it is never infringed on. So, enter the pandemic, and immediately these rights and freedoms were put on pause. I think for the most part, Canadians just figured it was justified because it was a worldwide phenomenon and everyone was just doing their part. Well, the problem with this is that no one seemed to notice that by taking action the way they did and continue to do, they actually violated the sacredness of the Constitution. This is Section 1 of the Charter of Rights. It says, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So this last part is where a lot of Canadians just trusted the government and figured this was their justification for doing what they continue to do. But what's important about any law is that we must interpret it correctly. We should never take anything at face value and certainly never apply our own interpretation. One way we can get an accurate interpretation of the Charter is by listening to someone who was there during its creation. Enter Brian Peckford, former Premier of Newfoundland and the last living architect of the Charter. He was present for the hours and hours of debate and discussions of this magnificent document. It actually took 17 months to compile. So this wasn't a sloppy, thrown-together last-minute document. Every word in this charter has meaning and context behind it. That's why it's so important and powerful to have someone who was there as a witness and a participant to give us the thinking that went behind this document. Peckford says the reason behind Section 1 of the Charter was in case of an emergency, if the state was in peril, like a war or insurrection. And knowing that this could be abused, they set high standards of criteria. That's what we read in Section 1. Only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified. Not only justified, but demonstrably justified. And let's be honest, a virus with a 99.98% survival rate is not an act of war or insurrection. It doesn't even come close to being justified. But even if it did apply, there are 4 criteria that it must satisfy. Number 1 being what we just talked about, demonstrably justifying it. We could all see how that failed. The second criteria is by law. No new laws were created. They acted within existing laws, and no parliaments held meetings or discussions because of COVID. Thirdly, they have to have reasonable limits. We all know the mandates and lockdowns have jumped back and forth like a fish out of water with no permanent end in sight. And lastly, those 3 criteria had to have acted within a free and democratic society. Since the 14 parliaments across the country held no such committees or discussions surrounding these issues, it is fair to say that there was also none of this going on. Bottom line is, these charter rights were illegitimately trampled on, and they continue to be trampled on. They failed to meet the criteria for justification, and Canadians are finally starting to realize that. These rights secure Canadians to do the very basic of things, like vote, the right to earn a living, to come, stay, and leave Canada when you please, despite your medical choice, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. The context of the word security, according to Brian Peckford, is the right to bodily autonomy, which means no one has the right to touch your body without your consent. This is why the Charter is so important to Canadians. I just feel that not a lot of people are aware of what they gave away so freely. But maybe you can help them by sending them this video. My aim is to educate and not humiliate. I personally don't think we have to use harsh language or angry tones in this fight for freedom. We have the truth on our side. So all we got to do is deliver this truth. Do it in love. Let's bring people together. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoy videos like this, then I invite you to join me on my channel. Hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Talk to you soon, and stay Canadian.